Imagine carrying your unborn child in your 8th month of pregnancy, your hands resting on the crib you painted together, your heart still believing he will come home, only to turn on the television and watch your husband walk into a hospital with flowers in his hand, his arm wrapped around another woman who is also round and full, also about to give birth. While the entire city watches the news broadcast that shatters your world in a single sentence, and in that moment, the floor falls away. Beneath you, the nursery you built becomes a room full of broken dreams, and you are left standing alone in the silence, wondering how the man who promised forever could be welcoming a child with someone else while yours is kicking inside you, waiting to be born into a life you never signed up for. Before we dive into this incredible story, do not forget to subscribe, and hit the bell icon button so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. That I stood at the window of the nursery. My hands rested on the small, wooden crib we had painted together. His hands had been steady then, guiding the brush along the edges. That I could feel my daughter move inside me. A soft roll against my ribs. A gentle reminder that I was not alone. The afternoon sun slanted through the lace curtains. That I had sewn those curtains myself, stitch by careful stitch. That I thought if I made the room beautiful enough, he would want to come home. That I thought if I was patient enough, loving enough, quiet enough, he would remember who we were. The phone rang at 4 in the afternoon. That I remember the exact time because I had just finished folding his shirts, the shirts he had left behind. That I kept them folded, stacked neatly on the chair, waiting for him. His mother's voice was tight on the line. Have you seen the news? I had not seen the news. That I had been too busy building a world for our child, too busy pretending that the silence in this house was temporary. She told me to turn on the television. That I walked to the living room slowly. My back ached. My ankles were swollen. Every step was a small negotiation with the weight I carried. That I found the remote on the coffee table next to a magazine about baby names. That we had circled 3 names together. That we had laughed about how she would be stubborn, just like him. That I pressed the power button, the screen flickered to life, and there he was. His face filled the screen. A photograph I did not recognize. That he was smiling in that photograph, not the smile he gave me in the last months. A real smile. The news anchor spoke words that did not make sense at first. They said he was at a hospital across the city. They said he was with a woman. They said the woman had just given birth. I heard each word separately. As if they were stones dropped into a deep well. I watched the footage. There he was, walking into the hospital with flowers in his hand. His other hand was wrapped around a woman's waist. A woman I had never seen. Her belly was round and full, just like mine. I stood there. The remote slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. The sound was loud in the empty room. I could not breathe, not because I was dramatic, but because my ribs had nowhere to go. The baby pressed upward. My lungs could not expand. I placed my palm flat against the wall to steady myself. The wallpaper was cool. I had chosen that wallpaper. He said he did not care about wallpaper. He said I could choose whatever I wanted. I thought that meant he trusted me. Now I understood it meant he was already gone. The television kept playing. They showed a picture of him with this woman. A vacation somewhere with palm trees. I had asked him to take me somewhere with palm trees. He said we could not afford it. He said we needed to save for the baby. I watched his arm around her shoulder. I watched her lean into him. I looked down at my stomach. The stretch marks that looked like rivers. The shirt that was no longer his. I had worn it because it smelled like him. I pressed my fingers to my chest. The baby kicked. A sharp, sudden movement. As if she too had seen what I had seen. As if she too felt the betrayal. I walked back to the nursery. I do not remember deciding to walk. I just found myself there. The crib looked different now. The paint seemed childish, the curtain seemed foolish. All that work, all that hope. I sat down in the rocking chair his mother had given us. She said it was the chair she used to rock him in. I had cried happy tears when she brought it. I had thought it meant I was truly part of the family. Now I understood that I was not part of anything. I was alone in a house full of baby things. I sat there for hours. The light changed from gold to orange to gray. I did not turn on any lamps. I did not eat. I did not drink. I just rocked back and forth. My hands on my belly, counting the movements. She was still there. She was still mine. The doorbell rang at 9 o'clock. I did not move. It rang again. Then came the knocking, steady, patient. I heard a voice call my name. It was Mrs. Patterson from next door. She was 73 years old. She walked with a cane. She had brought me soup 3 times since my husband stopped coming home. She never asked questions. She just left the soup on the porch and walked away. I did not answer. The knocking continued. I know you are in there, she said. Her voice was soft but firm. I saw the news. I closed my eyes. The rocking chair creaked. I am coming in, she said. I heard her key turn in the lock. I had given her a key months ago, for emergencies. she had not used it until now. The front door opened, her footsteps were slow, the cane tapped against the floor, tap, tap, tap. She stopped in the doorway of the nursery. That I did not look at her, that I kept my eyes on the window. The window where I used to watch for his car. She did not speak at first. She came into the room, she sat down on the floor next to the rocking chair. That I watched her lower herself slowly, her knees cracked, she winced, but she sat right there on the floor, her back against the wall, her cane across her lap. I brought soup, she said. That I said nothing. It is leek and potato, she said, your favorite, if I remember correctly. I had told her that once, months ago, when she brought the first pot of soup, that I had stood on the porch and cried and told her it was my favorite. She remembered. I am not hungry, I said. That my voice sounded strange. Hoarse. As if I had been screaming, but I had not made a sound. That is fine, she said, the soup will wait. We sat in silence, the darkness settled around us. She did not turn on a light, she did not ask me how I was, she did not tell me everything would be okay, she just sat there. On the floor, with her bad knees, keeping me company. After a long time, she spoke. My husband left me too. I looked at her then, her face was soft in the dim light, her eyes were not full of pity, they were full of understanding. I was 6 months along with my second, she said. He left me for a woman who worked at the diner. I did not know this. No one had ever told me this. I thought I would die, she said. I thought the shame would swallow me whole. She reached up and touched my hand, her fingers were dry and warm. But I did not die, she said, and neither will you. The baby moved. A strong, insistent movement. As if agreeing with Mrs. Patterson. What did you do? I whispered. She smiled. A small, sad smile. I packed his things, she said. I put them in boxes and left them on the porch. I changed the locks. And then I raised my children. She squeezed my hand, and they grew up knowing their mother was strong. They grew up knowing that a man's leaving does not define a woman's worth. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. It came out as a shudder, then a sob, then a flood. Mrs. Patterson did not shush me, she did not tell me to calm down, she shifted her position, she pulled herself up using the chair, and then she wrapped her arms around me as best she could. It was awkward. I was too big, she was too small, but it was real. It was warm. It was the first time in months I had been held. I cried into her shoulder. She smelled like flower and lavender, she smelled like safety. She held me until I stopped shaking, then she pulled back and looked at me. Now, she said, let us get you something to eat. You are eating for two. And one of you does not get to starve because the other one's father is a fool. I laughed. It was a wet, broken sound, but it was a laugh. She helped me up. We walked to the kitchen together. She moved slowly. I moved slower, but we moved. She reheated the soup. I sat at the table, she sat across from me, she watched me take the first spoonful. It was good. It was warm. It was the first thing I had tasted in weeks, not because I had not been eating, but because food had lost its flavor. This soup had flavor. It tasted like leek and potato. It tasted like kindness. I will stay tonight, she said. You do not have to, I said. I know, she said, but I am going to anyway. She washed the dishes while I sat. She found blankets in the hall closet, she made a bed on the couch, she told me to go to sleep. I went to my room. I lay in the bed that was too big. I put my hand on my belly, the baby was quiet now. Peaceful. As if she knew we were safe. I did not sleep, but I rested, and resting was enough. In the morning, I woke to the sound of Mrs. Patterson in the kitchen. I heard her talking on the phone, her voice was low, but I caught some words. No, she is not coming to the phone. You made your choices. Now you live with them. There was a pause, then she said, she is due in 3 weeks. You had better think long and hard about what kind of father you want to be. Because that door. You walked out of it. Another pause. I will tell her you called. But do not expect her to call back. She hung up. I heard her sigh, then I heard her open the refrigerator. We are having eggs, she called out, and toast. And you are eating every bite. I smiled. My face felt strange. It had been so long since I smiled. I got out of bed. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My face was puffy. My eyes were red. My hair was a mess, but I looked at myself, and for the first time in months, I did not look away. I thought about what Mrs. Patterson said, that a man's leaving does not define a woman's worth. I traced the lines on my belly, the rivers, the map of what I had carried alone. I was still here. I was still standing. I was still carrying this child, and I was going to be her mother, her whole mother, not a broken woman waiting by the window, but a woman who knew how to sit on the floor with someone in their darkest hour. A woman who remembered what soup tasted like. A woman who changed her own locks. I walked into the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson had set the table. 2 plates. 2 glasses of orange juice. A pot of tea, flowers in a small vase. She had picked them from her garden. I sat down, she sat down. We ate in comfortable silence. When we finished, she looked at me. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked at the flowers, yellow and white, bright against the morning light. I am going to finish the nursery, I said, for her. Not for him. Mrs. Patterson nodded. Good. I took a deep breath. And I am going to pack his things. And I am going to leave them on the porch. And then I am going to change the locks. Mrs. Patterson reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm. You are stronger than you know, she said. I shook my head. No, I said, I am learning. The days that followed were not easy. I packed his clothes into boxes, each shirt, each pair of shoes, each forgotten book. I did not cry. I folded each item carefully, not out of love, but out of closure. Mrs. Patterson came over every afternoon. She brought soup, or bread, or stories about her grandchildren. She sat with me in the nursery while I hung the last of the decorations. She helped me assemble the changing table when my back hurt too much to bend. She never said, I told you so. She never said, he does not deserve you. She simply showed up, day after day, showing me that kindness was not about grand gestures. It was about presence. It was about sitting on the floor with someone when the world had crumbled. He called, again and again. I let the phone ring. He left messages. They started with anger. How could you not take my calls? They moved to excuses. It was a mistake. I was confused. She meant nothing. They ended with pleading, please. Please just talk to me. I am sorry. I listened to every message, not because I wanted to hear his voice, but because I needed to remember. I needed to remember the sound of a man who had everything and threw it away. I needed to remember so I would never let him back in. On the third day, I changed the locks. I did it myself. It took 2 hours. I dropped the screws 3 times. I had to look up a tutorial on my phone, but I did it. I stood in front of the door with the new key in my hand. It felt heavier than the old one. It felt like a choice. That night, I had a contraction. It was small. A tightening. A release. I timed it on my phone. 15 minutes apart. I called Mrs. Patterson. She answered on the first ring. It is time, I said. Not yet, she said, but soon. Rest. Drink water. I am coming over. She arrived with a bag packed. She had been ready for weeks. She had been ready for me. The contractions continued through the night. Mrs. Patterson sat with me. She counted. She rubbed my back. She told me stories about her own births. She made me laugh between the waves of pain. When the sun rose, the contractions were closer. 5 minutes apart. We called a taxi. Mrs. Patterson held my hand in the back seat. The driver kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Just drive, Mrs. Patterson said. She is not going to have this baby in your car. I laughed, then I groaned, then I squeezed her hand so hard I thought I might break it. She did not flinch. The hospital was bright and loud. Nurses moved quickly. They put me in a room. They asked about the father. I said, there is no father. Mrs. Patterson squeezed my shoulder. There is a grandmother, she said, right here. The hours that followed were the hardest of my life. My body screamed. My mind wandered to dark places. I thought about him. I thought about the woman with the round belly. I thought about his new baby, and then I felt a hand on my forehead. Mrs. Patterson's hand, cool and steady. Stay here, she said, stay with me. She is coming. You are not alone. I held on to her voice. I held on to her hand. I pushed, and then there was a cry. A small, fierce, impossible cry. The nurse placed her on my chest. She was warm, she was wet, she was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes. A tiny face with a scrunched nose. She opened her eyes for just a moment, dark eyes, like mine. Hello, I whispered. Hello, my love. Mrs. Patterson was crying. I could hear her sniffling behind me. I could not look away from the baby. She is beautiful, Mrs. Patterson said. She is exactly who she was meant to be. I held my daughter to my chest. I felt her heartbeat against mine. 2 hearts. 1 room. We were whole. We were enough. He came to the hospital. I knew because the nurse told me. She said a man was in the waiting room. she said he was asking to see me. That I looked at my daughter in the bassinet next to my bed. She was sleeping, her tiny fists curled under her chin. That I thought about the boxes on the porch. That I thought about the new locks. That I thought about the months I sat alone in the nursery. That I thought about the woman who sat on the floor with me. No, I said, tell him I am resting. And then tell security he is not welcome. The nurse nodded. She did not ask questions, she simply left. Mrs. Patterson was in the chair by the window. She was knitting something small and yellow. She did not look up, but I saw the corner of her mouth lift. Good, she said, and that was all. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. That I learned to nurse in the dark. That I learned to change a diaper with one hand. That I learned to sing lullabies I did not know I knew. Mrs. Patterson came every morning. She brought coffee, she brought muffins, she brought a quiet steadiness that anchored me. She held the baby while I showered, she folded laundry while I napped. She told me stories about raising her own children, about the mistakes she made, about the things she wished she had done differently. She did not pretend to have all the answers, she simply offered what she had, her time, her presence. Her heart. One afternoon, when the baby was 6 weeks old, I received a letter, his handwriting. That I recognized it immediately. That I held it in my hands for a long time. The baby was asleep in my arms, her breath was soft against my neck. That I opened the letter. He wrote that he was sorry. That he wrote that he had made a terrible mistake. That he wrote that the other woman had left him. That she had taken the baby and moved to another city. That he wrote that he was alone. That he wrote that he thought about me every day. That he wrote that he wanted to come home. That I read the letter 3 times, then I folded it carefully. That I placed it in the box with the rest of his things. That I did not write back. That I did not call. That I simply closed the box and put it in the garage. The baby stirred. That I looked down at her face. She was beginning to smile, real smiles, not gas, not reflex. She looked at me like I was the whole world, and in that moment, I understood something. That I did not need him to come home. That I had built a home without him. That it was small. That it was imperfect, but it was mine. Months passed, the baby grew, she learned to roll over, she learned to sit up. She laughed at Mrs. Patterson's silly faces, she reached for my hair and pulled it with fierce determination. That I went back to work part-time. That I found a daycare near the house. The women who ran it were kind, they welcomed my daughter with open arms, they never asked about her father, they simply loved her. That I started going for walks in the evenings, the baby in the stroller. Mrs. Patterson sometimes joined me. That we walked through the neighborhood as the streetlights came on. That we talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her husband who left, she told me about how she rebuilt her life, she told me about the man she married years later. A good man. A steady man. A man who raised her children as his own. He is gone now, she said, but those years were the best of my life. She looked at me. Do not close your heart, she said, not forever. Just until you are ready. I pushed the stroller, the baby cooed. I am not ready, I said. I know, Mrs. Patterson said, but you will be. 1 year after he left, I received another letter. This one was different. It was not pleading. It was not desperate. It was simple. He wrote that he had been going to therapy. He wrote that he understood now what he had done. He wrote that he did not expect forgiveness. He wrote that he hoped I was happy. He wrote that he hoped our daughter was happy. He asked if he could send a birthday gift. Just a gift. No expectations. I read the letter. I sat with it. I thought about my daughter. I thought about the questions she would one day ask. I thought about the man who left, and the man he was trying to become. I showed the letter to Mrs. Patterson. She read it slowly, she handed it back. What do you think? She asked. I looked at my daughter. She was playing with blocks on the floor, she was stacking them carefully. When they fell, she did not cry, she simply started again. I think, I said slowly, that people can change. But change takes time. And trust is earned. Mrs. Patterson nodded. Then take your time, she said, there is no rush. I wrote back a short letter. I said our daughter was healthy and happy. I said her name was Grace. I said he could send a gift, but I said that was all. He sent a stuffed bear. A small, brown bear with a blue ribbon. I gave it to Grace. She hugged it, she loved it, she did not know where it came from, and I did not tell her, not yet. Time moved forward. Grace learned to walk, she learned to say, Mama. She learned to say, Pat Pat, for Mrs. Patterson. She learned to run, she learned to climb, she learned to ask questions. The questions started small. Where is the sun at night? Why do birds fly? Why do I not have a daddy? I answered each question carefully, honestly, age appropriately. I told her that some families have a mommy and a daddy, some have two mommies, some have two daddies, some have one mommy, some have grandparents, some have aunts and uncles, that I told her that our family was her and me and Mrs. Patterson, and that we were exactly the right family for her. She accepted this the way children accept everything, with complete trust. With open arms. When Grace was 3 years old, he wrote again that he had been in therapy for 2 years, that he had made amends with his own parents, that he had started volunteering at a shelter, that he asked if he could meet Grace, just once, that I in a public place, with me present, that I sat with this request for a long time, that I talked to Mrs. Patterson, that I talked to my own mother, that I talked to a therapist, that I weighed the risks, that I weighed the possibilities, that I looked at Grace. She was drawing at the kitchen table, that a picture of our house. 3 figures standing in front. 1 small, 2 tall. Who is that? I asked, pointing to the second tall figure. Grace looked up. That is Pat. She said, of course. I said that I kissed the top of her head, that I made my decision, that we met at a park that a bright Saturday morning. Grace wore her favorite dress, the yellow one with the flowers. She held my hand as we walked, she swung her arms, she sang a song about a duck, that he was sitting on a bench near the pond, that he looked different, older, softer, that he stood when he saw us, his hands were in his pockets, that he did not rush toward us. He waited, that I stopped a few feet away. Grace hid behind my leg. She peeked out at him. Hello, he said. His voice was quiet. Hello, Grace said. She did not hide again. She looked at him with those dark eyes. Them why eyes. I brought you something, he said. That he pulled a small box from his jacket, that he set it on the bench, that he stepped back. Grace looked at me, that I nodded. She walked to the bench. She opened the box. Inside was a small silver locket. She opened it. There was a picture of me inside, and a picture of her, taken on her 3rd birthday, that he must have gotten it from my mother. Grace looked at the locket, she looked at him, she looked at me. This is pretty, she said. Thank you. He smiled, his eyes were wet. You are welcome, he said. She put the locket around her neck, she ran back to me, she showed me the locket. She did not ask who he was, she did not ask why he was there, she simply accepted the gift, she simply moved on to the playground. We sat on the bench together. He and I. Watching her climb the slide. She is beautiful, he said. She is, I said. That he was quiet for a moment. I am sorry, he said. I know, I said. I am not asking for anything, he said. I just wanted to see her. I watched Grace go down the slide. She laughed, she climbed back up to do it again. She will have questions, I said, one day. I know, he said. I will answer them, I said, honestly, but gently. He nodded. I will do whatever you think is best, he said. That I looked at him, really looked. That he was not the man who left, that he was not the man who stood outside the hospital with flowers for another woman, that he was someone else, someone who had done the work, someone who had sat in the wreckage of his choices and decided to rebuild. We can do this slowly, I said, one step at a time. I understand, he said. Grace ran back to us, she was out of breath, her cheeks were pink. Mama, she said, will you push me on the swings? I looked at him. He looked at her. Maybe, I said, maybe your father can push you. Grace looked at him. He looked at Grace. She tilted her head. You are my daddy, she asked. That he knelt down so he was at her level. I am, he said, and I would love to push you on the swings. Grace thought about this for a moment, then she grabbed his hand. Okay, she said, but push me high. He laughed. That it was a sound I had not heard in years. That it was a good sound. That he walked with her to the swings. That he lifted her into the seat. That he pushed her gently at first, then higher. She shrieked with joy. Higher, she shouted. That he pushed higher. She flew toward the sky, and I sat on the bench, and I watched, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not love, not forgiveness, not yet, but hope. A small, fragile hope. The visits continued, once a month at first, then twice, always in public places, always with me present. That he did not push, that he did not demand, that he simply showed up. He brought books, that he brought bubbles, that he brought a steady, quiet presence. Grace grew to trust him. She called him daddy, she drew pictures of him, she saved him a seat at her tea parties. That I watched her blossom under his attention, and I watched him become the father he should have been from the start. That it was not easy. There were hard conversations, there were tears, there were nights when I wondered if I was making a mistake. But Mrs. Patterson was there. She sat with me through every doubt. She reminded me that forgiveness was not about forgetting. That it was about releasing the weight. You do not have to take him back, she said. You do not have to be his wife, but you can let him be her father. She deserves that. And so does he. I thought about my daughter, that I thought about the man on the bench, that I thought about the woman I had become, that I was not the woman who sat in the dark nursery, that I was not the woman who wore her husband's shirts to feel close to him, that I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, and I knew that I could let him in without losing myself. One evening, after a visit with her father, Grace asked me a question. "Mama," she said, "why did Daddy go away before?" We were sitting on the porch, the same porch where I had left his boxes, the same porch where Mrs. Patterson had let herself in with her key, the same porch that had seen my lowest moment. That I took a deep breath. "Daddy made some very big mistakes," I said. "He was confused. He did not know how to be the person he needed to be." Grace looked at me, her face was serious. "But he is better now," she said. That it was not a question, she said it with the certainty of a child who saw only the present. That I smiled. "Yes," I said, "he is working very hard to be better." Grace nodded. "That is good," she said, "because I love him." She leaned against me. "And I love you too, Mama." I wrapped my arms around her. That I held her close. "I love you too," I said, "more than anything." We sat on the porch as the sun went down, the streetlights flickered on. Mrs. Patterson's light came on next door. That I could see her silhouette in the window. She was making tea. That I smiled. Some things remained constant, some things were steady. The years passed. Grace grew into a bright, kind, curious girl. She had her father's laugh, she had my stubbornness, she had Mrs. Patterson's gentle way of listening. She asked more questions as she got older, about why he left, about why I let him come back. That I answered each question with honesty. That I told her about the pain, that I told her about the healing, that I told her about the woman who sat on the floor with me, that I told her about the soup that tasted like kindness, that I told her about the locks I changed, that I told her about the slow, careful work of rebuilding trust. She listened, she asked hard questions, she asked questions I did not have answers to, but we sat with them together, and that was enough. One afternoon, when Grace was 10, she came home from school with a project. She had to write about someone who inspired her. That I expected her to write about a famous scientist or a historical figure. But she sat down at the kitchen table with her notebook and began to write. An hour later, she read it aloud to me. She wrote about Mrs. Patterson, she wrote about the neighbor who sat on the floor with her mother on the darkest night, she wrote about the woman who brought soup and stayed, she wrote about the woman who showed that kindness was not about fixing things, that it was about showing up, she wrote about how one person's presence could change everything, she wrote about how love was not always romantic. Sometimes it was a 73-year-old woman with a cane and a key. That I listened with tears streaming down my face. When she finished, I pulled her into my arms. "That is beautiful," I said. "She is going to love it." Grace hugged me back. "I wrote about you too," she said. "I just did not read that part out loud." She handed me the notebook. That I read her words. She wrote that her mother taught her that strength was not about never falling, that it was about getting back up. She wrote that her mother taught her that forgiveness was not about forgetting, that it was about choosing to heal. She wrote that her mother taught her that a family was not defined by who was missing, that it was defined by who showed up. She wrote that her mother was the strongest person she knew. That I closed the notebook. That I looked at my daughter. She was no longer a baby in a bassinet, she was no longer a toddler with a stuffed bear, she was a young woman with a wise heart, and she was everything. That evening, I walked next door. Mrs. Patterson was in her garden, she was kneeling in the dirt, planting marigolds. She was 83 now, her movements were slower, but her hands were still steady. "Grace wrote about you," I said. She looked up, her face was weathered and kind. "What did she write?" she asked. That I sat down on the bench beside her garden. That I told her everything. She listened, she smiled, she wiped her hands on her apron. "That girl," she said. "She has a good heart. She learned it from you," I said. Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "She learned it from watching you rise," she said. "She learned it from watching you choose hope over bitterness. She learned it from watching you love." I looked at the marigolds, bright orange against the dark soil. "I do not know what I would have done without you," I said. Mrs. Patterson sat back on her heels, she looked at me with those clear, steady eyes. "You would have done what you needed to do," she said. "You were strong before I came. You just did not know it yet." She reached over and took my hand. "But I am glad I was there," she said. "I am glad I got to watch." I squeezed her hand. The sun was setting, the garden was quiet, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt peace, not the fragile hope of a woman sitting in a dark nursery, not the cautious optimism of a woman meeting her ex-husband at a park, but a deep, settled peace, the peace of knowing that pain could be transformed, that broken things could be mended, that love could take many forms. That a neighbor with a cane and a key could become a grandmother, that a man who made terrible choices could become a father, that a woman who sat alone in the dark could become a light, that a child born into uncertainty could grow into a girl who knew exactly what mattered. That I walked back to my house. Grace was on the porch. She was reading a book. She looked up when I approached. "Is Pat okay?" she asked. "She is perfect," I said. That I sat down next to her. She leaned against me. That we sat in silence for a while. The crickets began their evening song. The porch light flickered on. "Mama," Grace said. "Yes. I am glad you did not give up." I wrapped my arm around her. "So am I said. That I thought about the woman at the window, the woman with her hands on the crib, the woman who watched the news and felt her world shatter. That woman did not know what was coming. She did not know about the woman with the cane, she did not know about the soup, she did not know about the locks, she did not know about the park bench, she did not know about the marigolds. She did not know about the girl who would sit beside her and read her stories, she did not know about the peace that comes after the storm. But that woman kept going, she kept breathing, she kept building, she kept opening her heart, even when it would have been easier to close it, and because she did, she found a life she never could have imagined. A life full of love. A life full of grace. A life full of second chances, not because she forgot, but because she remembered, and she chose to rise anyway." The screen door creaked open behind us. I turned to see Mrs. Patterson making her way across the lawn. She carried a small dish covered in foil. Her steps were careful now, more deliberate than they used to be, but she still made the journey. She always made the journey. "I baked bread," she said, holding up the dish. "It is still warm." Grace closed her book and jumped up. She met Mrs. Patterson halfway and took the dish from her hands. "You did not have to do that," Grace said. "I know," Mrs. Patterson said, "but I wanted to." She lowered herself onto the porch steps. I moved to help her, but she waved me off. "I am not an invalid yet," she said, "just a little slower than I used to be." Grace sat beside her. She lifted the foil and inhaled deeply. "It smells like heaven," she said. Mrs. Patterson laughed. "It smells like flour and patience," she said, "which is the same thing, if you do it right." I sat down on the other side of Mrs. Patterson, the three of us on the porch steps, the way we had sat so many times before. The bread was warm in my hands when Grace tore off a piece and handed it to me. I bit into it. Soft, buttery. A little bit sweet. It tasted like every afternoon she had ever spent in my kitchen. It tasted like every moment she had chosen to be present. It tasted like love that asked for nothing in return. "This is the best bread you have ever made," I said. Mrs. Patterson smiled. "I have been practicing," she said. "I wanted to get it right." She looked at Grace. "For your school project," she said, "I heard you wrote about me." Grace's cheeks turned pink. "You were not supposed to know about that yet," she said. Mrs. Patterson reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Grace's ear. "Your mother told me," she said, "and I am honored. More honored than I can say." Grace looked down at her hands. "You saved us," she said quietly. Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "No," she said, "I sat with you while you saved yourselves. There is a difference." She took a piece of bread and held it in her lap. "When my husband left," she said, "I had no one. My family was far away. My friends did not know what to say. I sat alone in my house for 3 months. I stopped cooking. I stopped cleaning. I stopped answering the phone." Grace looked up. "What changed?" she asked. Mrs. Patterson looked at the sky. "The first stars were beginning to appear. One day," she said, "I looked in the mirror and I did not recognize myself. And I thought about my children. I thought about the life I wanted them to have. And I decided that I was not going to let one man's leaving destroy what I was building." She broke off another piece of bread. "So I started small," she said. "I made my bed. I opened the curtains. I walked to the corner store and bought milk. And then the next day, I did it again." She handed the bread to Grace, and slowly, I became myself again. Not the same self. A different self. A stronger self. I watched Grace absorb these words. I watched her file them away in the part of her mind where she kept the important things. "That is why I wrote about you," Grace said, "because you did not just help my mom. You showed her how to help herself. Mrs. Patterson's eyes glistened. "That is the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me," she said. Grace leaned over and kissed her cheek. "That it was quick, that it was fierce, that it was the kind of kiss a child gives when words are not enough." Mrs. Patterson closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she was smiling. "All right," she said, her voice a little thick, "enough of this. I did not come over here to cry into my bread." She stood up slowly. Grace offered her arm. Mrs. Patterson took it. "Walk me to my door," she said. Grace nodded. They walked across the lawn together. Mrs. Patterson's hand on Grace's arm. Grace's steps slow and careful. I watched them, the woman who had saved me, the girl who had given me purpose. They stopped at Mrs. Patterson's front door. I saw Mrs. Patterson say something to Grace. Grace nodded. Then Grace hugged her. A long hug, the kind of hug that says I see you, I love you, I am grateful for you. Mrs. Patterson went inside. The door closed softly behind her. Grace walked back across the lawn. She sat down beside me again. She picked up her book, but she did not open it. "She is getting older," Grace said. "She is," I said. Grace was quiet for a moment. "What will we do when she is gone?" she asked. I put my arm around her. "We will remember her," I said. "We will tell her stories. We will make her bread. And we will sit on the porch the way she taught us to sit. With people who need us." Grace leaned into me. "She taught me something else," she said. "What is that?" "She taught me that you do not have to be related to someone to be family." I kissed the top of her head. "That is the most important thing she taught me too," I said. That we sat in silence. The night grew darker, the stars grew brighter, the porch light hummed softly above us. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain. It was the kind of rain that comes down steady and soft, the kind of rain that makes you want to stay in bed. But I had work to do. I had a meeting at the community center at 9. I had been volunteering there for 2 years now, leading a support group for women who had been abandoned during pregnancy. I never planned to do it. It happened by accident. A woman from the church had heard my story. She asked if I would speak to someone who was going through something similar. I said yes. I sat with a woman named Diana in a coffee shop. She was 6 months pregnant. Her husband had left the week before. She could not stop shaking. I ordered her tea. I let her talk. I did not tell her what to do. I just listened, the way Mrs. Patterson had listened to me. When she finished talking, she looked at me. "How did you survive?" she asked. I thought about the nursery. I thought about the soup. I thought about the locks. I thought about the park bench. "One day at a time," I said. "One choice at a time. And I let people help me. I did not do it alone." She cried. I held her hand. When she left, she hugged me. She said I had given her hope. I did not know what to say to that. I had not done anything special. I had simply been there, but that was enough. That was always enough. The word spread. More women reached out. Eventually, the community center offered me a room. Every Tuesday night, women came. Some were pregnant, some had already given birth. Some had been left years ago but were still carrying the weight. We sat in a circle. We talked. We cried. We laughed. We ate food that someone had brought. We reminded each other that we were not alone. That was the most important thing, the reminder that none of us had to sit in the dark by ourselves. I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. Grace was already at the table. She had a bowl of cereal in front of her. Her hair was wet from the rain. She must have gone outside already. "You will catch a cold," I said. She looked up. "I wanted to check on Pat," she said. Her light was on. I paused. "Was she okay?" Grace nodded. "She was making tea," she said. "She said the rain made her knees ache. So I brought her the heating pad." I smiled. "That was kind of you." Grace shrugged. "She would do it for me," she said. She finished her cereal and put her bowl in the sink. "Can I come to your group tonight?" she asked. I looked at her. "It is usually just the women," I said. "I know," she said, "but I was thinking. Maybe I could help with the children. The women who come. They bring their babies, right?" I nodded. "Sometimes they bring their children." "Well," Grace said, "I could watch them. In the next room. So the women can talk." I looked at my daughter. She was 10 years old, but in moments like this, she seemed much older. "You want to watch a room full of toddlers?" I asked. She grinned. "I am good with kids," she said. "You know I am." She was right. She had a gift for it. She had been helping with the younger children at the community center for months. The parents loved her, the children adored her. "All right," I said, "but if it gets too chaotic, you come get me." "I promise," she said. She grabbed her raincoat from the hook by the door. "I am going to walk to the library before school," she said, I need to return these books. She held up a stack that I glanced at the titles. Point 1 was about marine biology. Point 1 was about the solar system. One was a novel about a girl who traveled through time. She was always reading, always learning, always hungry for more. Be careful in the rain, I said. She kissed my cheek on her way out the door. The screen door closed behind her. That I stood in the kitchen for a moment. The rain pattered against the windows. The house was quiet, but it was not an empty quiet. That it was a peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when a house is full of love, even when no one is speaking. That I left for work at 8. That I worked at a small bookstore downtown. That it had been my refuge after everything happened. That I had walked in one day with grace and a carrier on my chest. That I had no intention of applying for a job. That I just needed to be somewhere warm, somewhere with books, somewhere quiet. The owner, a woman named Eleanor, had looked at me over her glasses. She had seen the exhaustion in my face. She had seen the baby asleep against my chest. She had seen the wedding ring I still wore on my finger. Are you looking for work? She asked. That I blinked. I am sorry. You look like someone who needs work, she said, and I look like someone who needs help. She gestured to the stacks of books waiting to be shelved. So it seems we are both in luck. I started that day. That I did not leave. Eleanor became another anchor in my life, another woman who saw me and chose to help. She let me bring Grace to work when daycare fell through. She taught me how to recommend books to strangers. She taught me how to read a person by the titles they picked up. She taught me that stories were not just escapes, they were maps. Ways of understanding our own lives by living inside someone else's. For a while that I loved the bookstore. That I loved the smell of old pages. That I loved the way the light came through the front windows in the afternoon. That I loved watching a customer find the book they did not know they needed. That I had become the manager last year. Eleanor was retiring. She was moving to the coast to be near her grandchildren. She had offered me the store at a price I could afford, with help from the bank, with help from Mrs. Patterson, who insisted on co-signing. You are my family, she had said. And family helps family. I signed the papers 6 months ago. The bookstore was mine now. That I had changed the name. That it used to be called Eleanor's Books, now it was called the Porch Light, because that was what I wanted to be. A light for people who were standing in the dark. I unlocked the door at 8:15. That the bell above the door chimed. That I turned on the lights. That I walked through the aisles, straightening stacks, checking the displays. That I had a display table near the front. This month, it was books about resilience, stories of people who had survived hard things, memoirs of loss and recovery. Novels about women who rebuilt their lives. That I added a new book to the display this morning. That a memoir by a woman who had been left by her husband when she was 8 months pregnant. She had written it under a pseudonym, but I knew that I knew because I had been there. That I had sat in her audience at a reading 6 months ago. That I had waited afterward until the crowd thinned. Then I had approached her. Thank you, I said. She looked at me. She saw something in my face, something she recognized. You too? She asked. That I nodded. That we sat in the empty auditorium for an hour. That we talked about the nursery. That we talked about the news broadcast. That we talked about the locks. That we talked about the people who showed up. When I left, she hugged me. Write your story, she said. Someone needs to read it. I had thought about it. That I had even written a few pages, but the words would not come. Not yet, maybe someday, but not yet. For now, I was content to sell books to people who needed them. To put the right story into the right hands. To watch someone's face change when they found themselves on the page. The morning passed quickly. Customers came and went. A young woman came in with a baby in a stroller. She looked tired. She looked like she had not slept in weeks. She wandered through the aisles without picking anything up. I watched her for a while, then I approached. Can I help you find something? I asked. She looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I do not know, she said. I just needed to be somewhere. I nodded. I understand. She pushed the stroller back and forth. The baby was asleep. A tiny face wrapped in a pink blanket. How old? I asked. 6 weeks, she said. Her voice cracked. That I felt something open in my chest. A door I knew well. Would you like some tea? I asked. She looked at me. I do not want to be a bother. You are not a bother, I said. Come sit in the back. I will put the kettle on. She hesitated, then she followed me. I led her to the small office in the back. There was a couch, a kettle, a collection of mismatched mugs. I made tea while she settled the stroller next to the couch. I handed her a mug. She wrapped her hands around it. My boyfriend left 3 weeks ago, she said. He said he was not ready to be a father. I sat across from her. I am sorry, I said. She shook her head. I do not want him back, she said. I just do not know how to do this alone. I looked at her. At the baby. At the tea trembling in her hands. You do not have to do it alone, I said. I know it feels that way. But you do not. She looked up. How do you know? She asked. That I smiled. Because I have been where you are, I said, and I am still here. And so are you. And that is the first step. She stared at me for a long moment, then her face crumpled. She began to cry. That I moved to the couch beside her. That I put my arm around her shoulders. That I let her cry. The baby slept on, the kettle hummed softly, the rain continued against the windows, and I held her, the way Mrs. Patterson had held me, the way kindness had held me, the way the world had held me when I thought I was alone. She cried for a long time. When she stopped, she wiped her face with her sleeve. I am sorry, she said. Do not be sorry, I said. You are allowed to cry. She looked at the baby. I look at her and I just feel so much, she said. Love and fear and anger and hope. All at once. It is exhausting. I nodded. It is, I said, but it gets easier. Not all at once. But little by little. Day by day. She took a shaky breath. How did you do it? She asked. That I thought about my answer. That I wanted to give her something true, something that would help. I let people help me, I said. I did not try to be strong all the time. I let myself be weak. I let myself cry. I let myself ask for what I needed. She looked at me. What did you need? She asked. That I smiled. Soup, I said. She laughed at a surprised, wet laugh. Soup. Soup, I said, from my neighbor. She brought me soup and sat with me. And that was enough. It was not a solution. It was not an answer. But it was enough to get me through the next hour. And then the next. And then the next. She looked down at her tea. I do not have a neighbor like that, she said. Maybe you do not know it yet, I said, but someone will show up. Someone always shows up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a card. The card for the support group. Every Tuesday night, I said, there is a group of women. We have been where you are. We meet at the community center. There are snacks. And there is a 10-year-old girl who watches the children. She took the card. She looked at it for a long time. Maybe, she said. That I did not push. That I did not tell her she had to come. That I simply let her hold the card, let her know the door was open. She stayed for another hour. That we talked about her baby. Her name was Lily. She was named after the grandmother who had died 2 years ago. She talked about her job, her apartment, her mother who lived 3 hours away. She talked about her fear of failing. She talked about her fear of being enough. That I listened. That I did not offer advice. That I did not tell her what to do. That I just listened. When she finally stood to leave, she looked different, not fixed, not healed, but lighter. As if the weight had shifted just enough for her to breathe. Thank you, she said. I did not know I needed this. Sometimes we do not, I said, until we do. She pushed the stroller toward the door, then she stopped. What is your name? She asked. My name is Sarah, I said. Sarah, she repeated. I am Emma. She smiled. A small smile, but a real one. Maybe I will see you Tuesday, she said. I hope so, I said. She left. The bell chimed. That I watched her walk down the street. The rain had stopped, the sun was breaking through the clouds. She turned once and waved. That I waved back. Then I went back inside. That I picked up the 2 mugs and carried them to the small sink in the office. That I washed them. That I set them on the drying rack. That I looked at the couch where we had Saturday. The cushions were still warm. That I thought about the woman I had been, sitting in the dark nursery, rocking alone, waiting for someone to show up, and someone had shown up. Mrs. Patterson had shown up, with her cane and her key and her leek and potato soup. She had shown up, and because she had shown up, I had learned to show up, for myself, for Grace, for the women who came to the group on Tuesday nights, for the young mother who walked into my bookstore on a rainy morning. That was the lesson, that was always the lesson. You do not have to save anyone, you just have to show up, you just have to be present. You just have to sit with them in the dark until they are ready to turn on the light. I closed the bookstore at 6. The evening was clear, the streets were wet from the rain, the air smelled like earth and new growth. That I walked home slowly. That I passed the community center. The lights were on in the room where we met. That I paused for a moment. That I thought about Emma. That I hoped she would come, but even if she did not, I knew she had the card. She knew the door was open. That was enough. That was always enough. That I walked past Mrs. Patterson's house. Her light was on. That I could see her silhouette in the window. She was sitting in her chair, the same chair she had sat in for 30 years that I waved, even though I was not sure she could see me, she waved back. She always knew that I walked up my own porch steps, the screen door creaked, inside, I could hear Grace in the kitchen, she was singing a song about a duck, the same song she had sung when she was 3. That I smiled that I opened the door, the smell of something cooking filled the house. Grace was at the stove, she had a wooden spoon in her hand, she was stirring a pot. What is this? I asked. She turned. Soup, she said. Leek and potato. I stopped in the doorway. You made soup? She shrugged. I asked Pat for the recipe, she said. I wanted to have it, so I can make it when she is not here anymore. I felt my throat tighten. Grace, I said. She looked at me, her face was serious. She is not going to be here forever, Mama, she said. I know that. But I want to remember. And I want to be able to make it for other people. The way she made it for you. I crossed the kitchen that I wrapped my arms around her. She was almost as tall as me now. When had that happened? When had she grown so much? You are a remarkable person, I said into her hair. She hugged me back. I learned from you, she said. That we stood like that for a moment, then she pulled away. Do not let it burn, she said. I have been working on this for an hour. I laughed. That I picked up the wooden spoon and stirred. The soup was good. That it smelled like leek and potato. That it smelled like Mrs. Patterson's kitchen. That it smelled like home. That we ate dinner together. Grace talked about her day at school. She talked about a science project she was working on. She talked about a friend who was having a hard time. She talked about how she had invited that friend to sit with her at lunch. That I listened. That I watched her face as she spoke. She was so full of light. That so full of kindness. That so full of the lessons she had absorbed without even knowing it. When we finished eating, Grace cleared the table, she washed the dishes. That I dried them. That we worked in silence, comfortable silence, the kind of silence that comes from years of being together. When the dishes were done, Grace looked at me. Can we sit on the porch? She asked. It is a little cold, I said. I will get a blanket, she said. She disappeared into the hall closet. She came back with a quilt. Point-1 that Mrs. Patterson had given us years ago, patchwork, bright colors, warm. That we went out to the porch. That we sat on the steps. Grace wrapped the quilt around both of us. The night was cool, the stars were bright, the street was quiet. Do you think Emma will come on Tuesday? Grace asked. That I looked at her. How did you know about Emma? She smiled. I saw her leave the bookstore, she said. She looked like you. Like you in the pictures from before. I had shown Grace pictures of myself from that time, pictures I had hidden for years, pictures of a woman with hollow eyes and a round belly, pictures I had finally taken out of a box and put in an album, because hiding the pain did not erase it, and because I wanted Grace to know where we had come from. She did look like that, I said. Then she will come, Grace said, because you were kind to her. And when people are kind to you when you are that sad, you remember. I looked at my daughter. How did you get so wise? I asked. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I told you, she said. I learned from you. We sat in silence. The quilt was warm, the night was quiet, and I thought about the woman who had sat on this same porch with a box of her husband's things, the woman who had changed her own locks, the woman who had learned to stand on her own. That woman was still inside me, she always would be, but she was not alone anymore. She was surrounded by a daughter who made soup, by a neighbor who kept a light on, by a community of women who showed up for each other, by a life she had built with her own two hands. That I looked up at the stars. That I thought about all the nights I had spent looking at them from this porch, the nights when I was sure I would never be happy again, the nights when I was sure I had made every wrong choice, the nights when the silence was so loud I could not hear myself think, and then the nights that came after, the nights when Grace learned to say my name, the nights when Mrs. Patterson brought over cookies. The nights when I realized I was not waiting for anything anymore. I was living. That I was truly living, and that was the greatest gift of all. The next morning, I woke early, the sun was just beginning to rise. That I made coffee. That I stood at the kitchen window, the backyard was wet with dew, the garden Mrs. Patterson had helped me plant was blooming, marigolds, the same ones she planted in her own garden, bright orange against the green. That I heard movement upstairs. Grace was awake. That I heard her footsteps, then I heard her come down the stairs. She appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were still heavy with sleep, but she was smiling. Morning, she said. Morning, I said. That I poured her a cup of tea. She wrapped her hands around the mug. She sat at the table. That I sat across from her. What are we doing today? She asked that I thought about the day ahead, the bookstore, the deliveries that needed to be sorted, the new display I wanted to set up, the women who might come in looking for something they did not know they needed, the usual. I said, good, Grace said. She took a sip of her tea. I like the usual. I smiled. So do I said. That we sat together as the sun rose, the light came through the window. That IT touched the table. That IT touched the mugs in our hands. That IT touched the faces of the two people who had built a life from the wreckage of another, and it was enough. That IT was more than enough. That IT was everything. The week passed. Tuesday came. That I arrived at the community center early. That I set up the chairs in a circle. That I put out snacks. That I made tea. Grace was in the next room. She had set up toys and books and a small table for coloring. She was ready. The women began to arrive one by one. That they came in with babies on their hips and toddlers holding their hands. They came in with tired eyes and guarded hearts. They came in because they had nowhere else to go. They came in because someone had told them they did not have to be alone. That I greeted each one. That I learned their names. That I learned their stories. That I learned that pain had many faces but the same voice. The voice that says I am not enough. The voice that says I will never be okay. The voice that says I am doing this alone. And then, one by one, they sat in the circle, and they began to talk, and the voice changed. That IT became I am here. That IT became I am trying. That IT became you are not alone because I am here too. The door opened at 7:15. Emma walked in. She had Lily in the stroller. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, but she came. She came through the door. That I stood up. That I walked toward her. You came, I said. She nodded. I almost did not, she said, but I kept thinking about what you said. About someone always showing up. And I thought maybe I could be that someone for someone else. Even if I am a mess right now. I put my hand on her arm. You do not have to be anything right now, I said, you just have to be here. She looked around the room. At the women in the circle. At the babies playing on the floor. At the tea and the snacks and the worn carpet. This is nice, she said. It is, I said. Would you like to sit? She nodded. That I guided her to an empty chair. She parked the stroller beside her. She sat down. She looked at the women around her. They looked back. Some smiled, some nodded, some just looked, but they all saw her, and she saw them, and in that moment, she was not alone. None of us were. The meeting began. That we went around the circle. Each woman said her name. Each woman said how she was feeling. Some were angry, some were sad. Some were numb, some were hopeful. Emma spoke last. I am Emma, she said. Her voice was small. And I am terrified. She looked at Lily in the stroller. But I am here. The woman next to her reached over and took her hand. She did not say anything, she just held it, and Emma did not pull away. That I watched them. The woman who had shown up for me years ago had shown me how to show up for others, and now I was here, and Emma was here, and the chain continued. That was the work, that was the lesson. That was the love. That IT did not end. That IT did not stop. That IT grew. That IT spread. That IT wrapped around people who were hurting and held them until they could stand on their own, and then they held someone else, and on it went, and on it would always go. After the meeting, I walked home. Grace walked beside me. The night was cool, the stars were bright. She came. Grace said, she did, I said. I watched Lily. Grace said, she is so small. She is, I said. Emma was crying when she picked her up, Grace said, but she was smiling too. I looked at my daughter. That is how it is sometimes, I said. You can be sad and happy at the same time. You can be broken and healing at the same time. Grace nodded. She understood. She had always understood. That we passed Mrs. Patterson's house. The light was on, the silhouette was in the window. Grace waved, the silhouette waved back. That we walked up our porch steps. The screen door creaked. That we went inside. The house was warm, the house was ours. That I locked the door behind us. The key turned smoothly, the lock held, and I thought about the woman who had changed that lock with her own hands. Who had stood at this door and decided she was worth protecting. She was still here, she was still standing, and she was not alone. She would never be alone again, because she had learned that love was not about waiting for someone to come back. That IT was about building something that could not be broken. That IT was about showing up, for yourself, for your child, for the neighbor next door, for the stranger in the bookstore. For the woman who walked into a circle of chairs on a Tuesday night. That IT was about being the light for someone else, the way someone had been the light for you, and in doing so, finding that the light never ran out. That IT only grew brighter. The more you gave it away, the more it came back to you. In soup. In bread. In a daughter who made leek and potato soup from memory. In a neighbor who kept her light on. In a bookstore that bore the name of a porch. In a circle of women who held each other up. That was the story, not the one that started with a man who left. But the one that started with a woman who stayed for herself, who stayed for her daughter, who stayed for the life she was building. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One act of kindness at a time, and that story was not over. It was just beginning. Every day, a new page, every day, a new chance to write something beautiful, something true, something that would last. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a car door closing. It was early. Too early for visitors. I looked at the clock on my nightstand. 5:47, the light outside was still soft, the sky pale with the first hints of dawn. I slipped out of bed and walked to the window. A car I did not recognize was parked in front of Mrs. Patterson's house. A young woman stood on the porch. She was knocking, not urgently, but steadily. Something about the way she stood made my chest tighten. I pulled on my robe and went downstairs. I opened the front door just as the woman knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door again. She looked at me. Her face was young, too young. She could not have been more than 20. Her eyes were red, her hands were empty. She had no coat, even though the morning was cold. "Can I help you?" I called. She walked toward me, her steps were unsteady. "I am looking for Margaret Patterson," she said, her voice was thin. "I was told she lives here." "She does," I said. "Is everything all right?" The woman shook her head, tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do not know where else to go," she said. "Someone at the shelter told me about her. They said she helps people." The door to Mrs. Patterson's house opened. Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway. She was in her robe, her hair was loose and white around her shoulders, her cane was in her hand, but her eyes were sharp. She looked at the young woman, she looked at me, then she looked back at the young woman. "Come in," Mrs. Patterson said. "It is cold out here." The woman hesitated. "I do not want to impose," she said. "You are not imposing," Mrs. Patterson said. "I was already awake. These old knees do not let me sleep past 5 anymore." She stepped back and held the door open. The young woman walked toward her. She stopped at the threshold. She looked back at me. I nodded. She went inside. The door closed. I stood on my porch for a moment. The morning was quiet again. I heard Mrs. Patterson's voice through the wall, low and steady, the same voice that had spoken to me all those years ago. I went back inside. Grace was coming down the stairs. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were still half closed. "Who was that?" she asked. "A visitor for Pat." I said. Grace's face changed. "Is she okay?" "She is fine," I said. "She is helping someone." Grace nodded. She understood without me explaining. She went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. She moved quietly, deliberately. She took down 3 mugs. "1 for me, 1 for herself. 1 for the young woman who might need it." I watched her. She had learned this from Mrs. Patterson. She had learned to anticipate what people needed before they knew they needed it. She had learned to prepare. Be ready. Have the kettle on. We drank our tea in the kitchen. The sun rose higher, the light filled the room. After an hour, I heard Mrs. Patterson's front door open. I looked out the window. The young woman was standing on the porch. She was crying again, but she was standing straighter. Mrs. Patterson came out behind her. She had a bag in her hand. A small bag, the kind you pack when you have nothing. She handed it to the young woman. The young woman took it. She hugged Mrs. Patterson. A long hug, the kind of hug that says thank you for seeing me. Then she walked to her car. She got in. She sat there for a moment with her hands on the steering wheel. Then she drove away. I walked over to Mrs. Patterson's house. She was still standing on the porch. She looked tired, but she looked peaceful. "Who was she?" I asked. Mrs. Patterson leaned on her cane. "Her name is Maya," she said. "She is 19 years old. She left her husband 3 days ago. He was not a good man." She paused. "She has nowhere to go. The shelter is full. Someone told her about me. About the room upstairs." I looked at her. "You are letting her stay?" Mrs. Patterson smiled. "She is already here," she said. "She is sleeping in the guest room. I told her she could stay as long as she needs." She looked at me. "You know how it is," she said. I knew exactly how it was. "What does she need?" I asked. Mrs. Patterson thought for a moment. "Time," she said, "and someone to believe her. And maybe some of your soup." I smiled. "I can do that." I went back to my house. Grace was at the kitchen table. She had her school book spread out in front of her, but she was not reading, she was looking out the window. Is she staying? Grace asked. For now, I said. Her name is Maya. Grace nodded. I saw her face, she said. She looked like the women at the group. She did, I said. Grace closed her book. I will make her soup, she said. You have school, I said. I will make it after, she said. She will need it tonight. She stood up and gathered her books, she put them in her bag, she put on her coat, she paused at the door. Mama, she said. Yes. I am glad we live next to Pat. I smiled. So am I. She left. The screen door closed behind her. That I stood in the kitchen. That I looked at the 3 mugs on the counter. Point 1 for me, point 1 for Grace, point 1 for Maya. Grace had put them out before she knew there was anyone to drink from them. She had put them out because she believed someone would come, and someone had. That was the faith, that was the hope, the belief that someone would come, and the readiness to receive them when they did. I went to the bookstore. The morning passed in the usual way. Customers came and went. That I recommended books, that I sorted deliveries, that I talked to Eleanor on the phone. She was happy at the coast. She said the ocean was good for her soul. She asked about the store. She asked about Grace. She asked about Mrs. Patterson. Same as always, I said. Good, Eleanor said. Some things should not change. I thought about Maya, asleep in Mrs. Patterson's guest room. That a stranger who had knocked on a door in the dark, who had found someone waiting. Some things should not change. That was one of them. That I closed the store at 5. That I walked home through the neighborhood. The leaves were beginning to turn orange and red and gold. The air was crisp. That I passed the community center. The lights were off, but I knew that on Tuesday they would be on again. The circle would form again. The women would come again. That I turned on to my street. Mrs. Patterson's light was on. My light was on. Grace was home. That I could see her in the kitchen window. She was at the stove. She was making soup. That I walked up the porch steps. That I opened the door. The smell hit me first, leek and potato, but there was something else. Bread, fresh bread. You made bread too? I asked. Grace turned. She was flour dusted and proud. Pat came over, she said. She showed me how. She said if you are going to make soup for someone, you should make bread to go with it. I looked at the loaf on the counter. That it was golden brown. That it was lopsided. That it was perfect. It looks wonderful, I said. Grace grinned. It tastes better than it looks, she said. I already tested it. She handed me a slice. That it was warm. That it was soft. That it was good. That it was better than good. That it was made with care. That it was made with love. We should take some to Maya, I said. Grace nodded. She was already reaching for a container. She filled it with soup. She wrapped the bread in a cloth. She put it all in a basket. She looked at me. Should we go now? She asked. That I looked out the window. Mrs. Patterson's light was on. The guest room window was dark. Let her rest, I said. We can go in the morning. Grace set the basket on the counter. She looked at it for a moment, then she covered it with a dish towel. I will leave it here, she said, so it is ready. She went upstairs to do her homework. That I sat in the living room. That I looked at the basket on the counter. That it was a small thing, soup and bread. But it was not small. That it was everything. That it was what Mrs. Patterson had given me. That it was what I had given to Emma. That it was what Grace was learning to give. That it was the chain of people who had been in the dark and found a light. And who became lights for others. The next morning, Grace was up early. She was dressed before I came downstairs. She had the basket in her hands. Can we go now? She asked. That I smiled. Let me get my shoes. We walked next door. The morning was bright. The air was cold. Grace knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door. That it opened almost immediately. Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway. She was fully dressed. She had been up for hours. Good morning, she said. Good morning, Grace said. She held up the basket. We made you soup and bread. For Maya. Mrs. Patterson took the basket. She looked inside. She looked at Grace. Her eyes were soft. This is beautiful, she said. She will be so grateful. She stepped back. Would you like to come in? Grace looked at me. That I nodded. That we went inside. Mrs. Patterson's house was small. That it was tidy. That it was filled with the things she had collected over a lifetime, photographs on the walls, books on the shelves. A quilt on the couch that she had made herself. The guest room door was closed. She is still sleeping, Mrs. Patterson said. She needed it. We sat in the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson made tea. She put the bread on a plate. She set the soup on the stove to warm. She told me her story last night, Mrs. Patterson said. She poured the tea. She married young. Too young. He was older. He told her she did not need anyone else. He told her he would take care of everything. She sat down across from us. He did not take care of anything. Except isolating her. Except controlling her. Except breaking her down until she did not know who she was anymore. Grace was very still that I reached for her hand under the table. Mrs. Patterson looked at us. She left 3 days ago with nothing but the clothes she was wearing. She said she has been sleeping in her car. She heard about me from a woman at a gas station. A woman who had stayed in that room upstairs 20 years ago. Grace looked at the closed door. 20 years, she said. Mrs. Patterson nodded. Her name was Denise, she said. She came to me in the middle of the night. Her husband had thrown her out. She had 2 children. She stayed for 6 months. And then she got back on her feet. She got a job. She got an apartment. She raised those children. And now she is a grandmother. She smiled, and she still sends me a card every Christmas. Grace looked at the basket. Is that why you help people? She asked. Because someone helped you? Mrs. Patterson thought about this. Yes, she said, and because helping is the only thing that makes sense. When you have been in the dark, you do not forget what it felt like. And you do not forget the hand that reached in to pull you out. She looked at me. So you keep your hand out. Always.